Welcome back. So this is going to be part 2 of our first lecture. I apologize for having to cut our lecture sometimes in half, but I'm having a very difficult time uploading our lectures on titanium since Fullerton is no longer supporting, I guess, their instructors, their online instructors, by providing them with free space to upload their lectures. So that is unfortunate. So I'm trying to improvise the best way I can. So now let's go back in history and to some significant cases in epidemiology. As I said before, I have provided you with links to various of those cases, and it's also more information can be found inside your text. So please familiarize yourself with all those cases that I'm going to talk about. So cholera in the late 19th century. Living in London during the middle of the 19th century was a precarious day-to-day journey, especially if you happened to live in the poorer areas of the city. One disease that held a particularly harmful grip on the London population was cholera. During the decades between 1830s and 1860s, cholera cast a wide net of death and destruction over London. Within the span of 30 years, it ravaged communities, created widespread panic, and was responsible for nearly 40,000 deaths. When cholera first emerged, no one thought to identify the poisoned drinking water as the source of the contagion. In fact, the idea that cholera was water-based would not be introduced until nearly 2 decades after its initial outbreak. The most commonly held theory or belief was that cholera was spread via the air through a cloud like miasma. Others firmly believed that since the disease spread more rapidly through the poor districts, that the wealthy were purposely poisoning the poor. Still more believed that cholera was a visitation from God and that he was exacting a punishment to the community on behalf of their sins. Such beliefs might seem far-fetched today, but at the time were not wholly unusual. Knowledge about microbes and bacteria was just beginning to emerge, and only the scientific elite were aware of their existence. John Snow believed that cholera was caused by a microbe and was spread by contaminated water. Snow's triumph was to be far from an oversight success. Despite the evidence he presented, those in favor of the miasma theory continued to hold sway for decades to come. People infected with cholera suffer from diarrhea so badly that they become dehydrated. Within a short time, 2 or 3 days, nearly half of them will die. On the night of the 31st of August, 1854, cholera broke out in the Soho section in London, the most terrible outbreak of cholera which ever occurred in the kingdom. In a single night, doctors reported 56 new cases of cholera, all within a few blocks of each other. Before the outbreak was over, nearly 500 people lost their lives. John Snow was the man who solved the mystery, and that is why he, at least UCLA, calls him the father of epidemiology, and they have dedicated an entire website to his glory. And actually, if you visit London, the Soho district, they even have a pub where you can go drink a beer, and you can still see actually the original street pump that caused the outbreak. So what made John Snow famous was, well, of course he was a doctor, so he was a scientist essentially, and his mind worked very differently than other people that simply theorized without providing any proof. So John Snow didn't just theorize, he actually collected evidence, and then essentially he was able to explain what happened, although we did not have a very clear understanding of bacteria back then. He was able to show that it was not caused by miasma, but actually by contaminated water. Some other important epidemiologic observations that led to effective measures in human population would be fluoride. So you probably know that, at least in California, our water is fluorinated. How fluoride is one of those things that is highly controversial. Although it has shown, study after study, that it helps prevent cavities. So years ago, such observation was made, and they decided to actually create a study to truly, I guess, prove, if you may, that fluoride helps with dental caries. So here's a graph that shows that wherever you see, I guess, where the areas that have water with high fluoride content, they're actually the people have less dental caries or cavities. So the research team conducted a study in two upstate New York towns, Kingston and Newburgh. Of course, you cannot randomly distribute into groups people who's going to drink the water with the fluoride and without, simply because everybody needs to have access to fresh water. So what they did is they provided fluorination in Newburgh and not in Kingston. And as you can see, right, there's a huge difference in dental caries between the two cities. Later on, due to controversy, they actually took the fluoride away. So this is what happened. So for, as soon as they kind of like took out the fluoride, within a period of 6 years, the dental cavities went up. So for sure we know that fluoride actually prevents dental cavities, although some people seem to not appreciate the benefit, and they simply afraid that fluoride can cause cancer and some other diseases, although there's no proof for such claims, simply because the fluoride that is added to the water, it's such small amounts that it is almost impossible to harm our health. Another person who was quite brilliant for his time was Ignaz Semmelweis. So he lived in Vienna. He was the director of a major hospital, and back then a lot of women used to die from childbed fever. Now, what happened was that particular hospital had two different clinics. One clinic was operated and served, I guess, by doctors and medical students, while the other clinic that women used to go and deliver babies was mostly employed by midwives. And then he noticed a significant difference between the two clinics. Sure as anything, as soon as he was able to evaluate the data, he realized that the first clinic had twice as many incidents. So what made the difference? Upon reflecting, he realized that probably the doctors and the students who were practicing all day using dead people, cadavers, they were also delivering babies. And back then, washing hands was not such a thing. They didn't realize that you can actually make people sick simply by touching them. They didn't believe in bacteria. They didn't believe in viruses. They didn't believe that such a thing can happen. So hand washing was not something that you did in order to destroy bacteria. You simply did it if your hands looked dirty. Here again, there is a graph that you can also find inside your textbook that shows that as soon as Semmelweis implemented the hand wash intervention, the number of cases literally dropped, and in fact was the same number as the clinic number 2 where the midwives worked. Edward Jenner and the smallpox. So again, back then, 18th century, a lot of people were dying from smallpox. And you can see untreated smallpox in the picture, right? It can really disfigure an individual and also kill him. Now, Jenner was trying to develop a vaccine back then, but he was not very successful. At some point, he did observe that dairymaids, women who were actually working with cows, were developing a milder version of cowpox. So he thought to himself, well, if it looks very similar with smallpox, but it's milder, how about if I actually get the cowpox virus and use that to immunize people? The reason that he was unsuccessful at the beginning was he was using the full strength of the virus from the smallpox, and when he was trying to immunize people who were not infected, the virus was so strong that he would actually kill those people too, or make them very sick. The cowpox, on the other side, was a milder version of the smallpox, so it did not have the severe side effects, and it worked. And if you remember from Personal Health 101, when you learn about the different types of vaccines, right? Active, passive, and so on and so forth. Vaccines do contain a virus, but usually it's very mild, deactivated, or sometimes even killed if that virus is too strong. It is enough just to activate the immune system, but not strong enough that it would actually put your immune system at a stall simply because it has fight a disease. So Edward Jenner figured that out, and thanks to him, we actually have a vaccine for smallpox. In conclusion, epidemiology is truly an invaluable tool. It does enhance quality of life, and it does help us prevent and control diseases. So once again, this was a very small, tiny introduction of Chapter 1. Hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully it spurred your curiosity to learn more about epidemiology. The remaining chapters, they're going to focus more on study design. So it's going to be a little bit more different, a little bit more involved and difficult, but again, it's a very interesting subject, and I think you're going to enjoy it. Have a good one.